This podcast is about context theory and the legitimacy or otherwise of context-sensitive design. Richard Sennett, a famous sociologist, attacked one of the fundamental principles of landscape architecture in 2013. He did so by being, in my view, too absolutist in his persuasive argument for open cities and against closed cities. In a lecture delivered to the Harvard Graduate School of Design, Sennett used the phrase tyranny of context to damn the principle that development projects should respond to local character. Alexander Pope poetized an opposite policy with his advice to consult the genius of the place. Without this principle, there is no need to conserve wonderful cities or beautiful landscapes. You can just fill them up with standard blocks and architectural oddities. And you can make the world's cities indistinguishable, regardless of cultural and environmental contexts. To my mind, this is a really bad idea, and it contains nothing of the craftsman ideal Sennett has been writing about in his recent books. When listening to the excerpt from his lecture I'm about to play, please note these points. Sennett sees architecturally context-sensitive designs as, I quote, a fundamental challenge to us politically. Since he's a sociologist, he may mean a challenge to the liberal orthodoxy of anything goes postmodernism. Sennett's audience of designers responds warmly to his hatred of contextualism.
And I think some of you have heard me rant about this before, but I'm going to rant again. A system is closed in time, in my view, when we design in context. I am an opponent of historical districts. I'm particularly an opponent of what passes for new urbanism, in which everything in time looks continuous and linear. And unfairly, I'm going to show you two examples of why I'm an opponent of this. The first is Seaside. You saw it coming. This to me is hell. So is this. This is the housing in Seaside. This is context with a vengeance. These are all new buildings, right? But there's no disruption from the past. And what you produce is this tyranny of context. Now, that's the familiar American version of it. I'm going to now show you what we're struggling with in Britain, thanks to Prince Charles. This is Poundbury in England. This is an overview. Poundbury is in southwest of England. Prince Charles sponsored this development. Here's what it looks like. That's a public corner. That's the town hall. That's housing. What you need to know about this is that none of these is more than 7 years old. All new built, all green, 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 you know? I mean, it's up-to-date technology. That's a new street. Now, the thing about this is the most popular residential development in Britain. There are waiting lists for people who want to buy into this dream. And it is a fundamental challenge to us politically.
So, Sennett doesn't like Poundbury. You may not like it either, and maybe I wouldn't, though I haven't been there. But with Sennett telling us that it is the most popular residential development in Britain, just what is the political challenge? And who is being tyrannical? Prince Charles, who promoted the design, or Richard Sennett, who excoriates it, or both of them? In an essay on context theory published in 1996, I used diagrams to illustrate 3 logical alternatives for relating a new development to an existing context. First, identity, with the design aim of fitting the development into its context so well that it can't be recognized as new. Second, difference, with the design aim of making the development strikingly different from its context. People call this starchitecture. Third, similarity, with the design aim of seeking a balance between the two extremes. These alternatives can be applied to many aspects of design projects, including paving, planting, walling, other materials, heights, colours, microclimate, spatial design, and the management of surface water. So a project can be similar in some respects and different in other respects. The simplest examples to illustrate these alternatives are architectural, and London, where I live, has good exemplars. The buildings fronting the western quadrant of Regent's Park Crescent have been entirely replaced in the last few years, but are nearly identical to their predecessors. To my mind, this design policy was as correct as I believe it to be popular. Historic England has made this crescent the only new build in London to be listed Grade 1 for design quality. Now look at the Shard. It is glass-clad and on completion was the tallest building in Europe. So, in terms of scale and materials, the design policy was difference. But its similarity with the profiles of London's historic church spires may explain its widespread popularity. Now consider the walkie-talkie. Aesthetically, it is widely disliked, possibly because it looks more like a vintage wireless handset, a walkie-talkie, than an architectural design. Now consider how these two high buildings meet the street. The local climate was ignored, and the microclimate around both buildings is truly awful. They act like sails, but instead of putting the wind energy to a good purpose, they make life miserable for plants and pedestrians. Spatially, the street space around the walkie-talkie is better than the plaza below the Shard. It's more vegetated and has a degree of spatial containment and a green living wall. But it's not very good for walking or for talking or shopping or just sitting to enjoy the sun. In fact, when the building was nearing completion, much ridicule was attracted by the way its parabolic facade so focused the sun that you could fry an egg in a frying pan on the pavement. Things might have been better if the landscape architects had been commissioned for a context-sensitive site plan before the architectural concept had crystallised, instead of, I assume, being asked to detail up the paving and the planting. I do, of course, accept the case for some buildings to differ markedly from their neighbours, and my 1996 clarification of Pope's advice regarding the genius of the place was that she has to be consulted, always, but she need not be obeyed, always. I see this as an aspect of the open systems Sennett advocates. Here's what Alexander Pope wrote. Consult the genius of the place in all, that tells the waters or to rise or fall, or helps the ambitious hill the heavens to scale, or scoops in circling theatres, the vale, calls in the country, catches open glades, joins willing woods, and varies shades from shades. Now breaks, or now directs the intending lines, paints as you plant, and as you work, designs. I see this as a craft approach to design, and in line with Richard Sennett's current interest in craftsmanship. So I conclude my rant with the suggestion that Sennett redirects his fire. Like Karl Popper, he should target blueprint planning and master planning. They are flawed design methods, and they do have tyrannical tendencies. A better approach, which welcomes openness, complexity, emergence, and contextualism, is landscape urbanism. Well, thanks for listening. If interested, you can find more of my views on the gardenvisit.com and landscape architecture YouTube channels and websites. Or you can subscribe on your podcast player to hear future podcasts about designing cities, landscapes and gardens.